Welcome to the Festival of Discovery, and this is a session which is all about beautiful things happening when people come together. We have three amazing representatives from great organisations, and the Climate Coalition, the RSPB and Groundwork, and I will introduce you to them in each turn, but we're going to start off with Fiona Deer, who is an amazing and inspirational woman who works for the coalition, but also they are behind the Great Big Green Week, which is what Fiona is going to share and talk to us about today. Welcome, Fiona.
Hello, thank you for having me. Great, well, I'll just say a few words about I'll definitely talk about the Great Big Green Week, but just generally about working with others. So I've been at the Climate Coalition for over 12 years now. So I'm very familiar with the joys and the challenges of working with others. And yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There's lots of challenges. We're seeing that right now at COP, that, you know, just as soon as you get into the detail, it gets so hard. It's quite easy to agree on the top lines. You get into the detail, and that's what's happening right now at COP, which is why it's over running. There's a lot of people signing up to big ambition and they're not following through, which again is what we're seeing at COP. And it just can be slower. Working together can be slower. But the reason that we do it is because you can achieve so much more with it, of course. In the case of COP, we just couldn't. There's no point trying to tackle climate change if we don't do it in a global way. So that's an absolute imperative. But also, just from the coalition point of view, we've always just the amount that we can achieve, the access to the different types of people in the networks has always been worth it. So we've pushed on, and just going to put a great massive shout out to those that are still at COP and just have been up all night and trying to negotiate, and happy to chat about that later on if people are interested. But anyway, so the most recent of our kind of big working together moments was the Great Big Green Week, which we did in September. For that, it's been really interesting for me, having worked there for 12 years, because it just felt like we sort of it was kind of the combination of lots of what we've tried to do. So we've done lots of bringing together people for key moments with a specific ask, so around a mass lobby or a virtual lobby, or sometimes looser things, so kind of do an event but invite your MP, things like that. And we've had a good response, but this year we just had to kind of supercharge it because of COP. So we knew it had to be massive, and we thought a little bit differently. And it was really exciting to see what a difference that made. So first of all, we launched the campaign much earlier. So we just gave people more time, and we recognised that kind of people just need time to think about it. Then they need to talk to their group, and then they need time to like reach out to other groups and all of this stuff. So we launched kind of I think it was 8 months ahead of the Great Big Green Week, which I think made a big difference. I think one of the really key things that we did was that the ask was so open. It was, I mean, some people had a bit of a challenge with that because they were like, what exactly do you want us to do? But we kept it as simple as just do something during the week of the 18th to 26th of September. And through that, it just worked for lots of groups that probably wouldn't have come to a lobby if we'd been that specific. And they wouldn't have been interested in a talk necessarily, or if we'd said only litter picks, they wouldn't have been, we wouldn't have got the same breadth. But because we kept it open, everybody was able to kind of work to their strengths, and we weren't asking people to kind of step too far from where they were. It was kind of just do what you're doing and celebrate that, but just do it during this week so we can really kind of see what the whole movement looks like. And we actually asked more of people this time. So we actually asked people to put on festivals, local festivals. So that's not just one event. And if you took time, there was my local festival, which I was delighted about, had 100 events. And they actually, the reason it worked for them is because they were in an existing network and they had already built up a lot of these partnerships. So with them, it was like they'd done the groundwork and then they were able to just ask them to do interesting things. And that's how they got so many. But there are others that just started from scratch and they still managed 20 or 30 events. And that's where we were really excited, because that's when you get people forming those relationships that are going to last. You don't work together on something that big like a festival and then kind of stop working together. So we've heard a lot about people staying in touch afterwards. Then the last thing that we did is we provided funding, because we knew that kind of funding is a barrier, and also that's one of the things that can take the longest. So we wanted to just help people along. And what we really noticed is, obviously, I think that helped with spreading the word, because it's a different thing. We're offering something back. It also helped a different type of group get involved. So we had much more representative engagement from ethnically diverse groups, and we spoke a lot with the Black Environment Network, and they said that one of the key things is you've got to compensate people. So that seems to have helped. But anyway, so I've talked a lot about the background to this, why we did it. But so what happened? So there were 5,000 events, which we were delighted with. That was our stretch target, and we got there. And over 200 local festivals. I remember thinking, kind of, do you think we could aim for 30? Do you think that's realistic? And then over the summer, it was just this constant stream of excitement as we realized, oh, maybe we'll get 100. And it just went up and up and up. And it was just that real sense that kind of like, people are ready for this. This is what they want to do. They want to work together. They just need a kind of the catalyst, right? So it was brilliant. But just to give you a bit of a sense, like you'll see we're going to show a video in a minute, and you'll get much better than my words, a sense of what happened. But some of my favorite examples were, there was so like a group of teenagers visited old people in a kind of retirement home to talk about climate change. And so there was kind of like intergenerational sharing. I loved that. I went on a bike ride on the last day of Great Big Green Week, and it was, oh my goodness, it was just the best thing to do to finish the week, because there were 50 people for starters, which is a massive bike ride. It was so calm and serene because you have to go quite slowly. But then also, we kind of there was the London's first Turkish cycling club was involved, and so we went and had like this amazing Turkish food like in the middle of the bike ride. Then we heard talks from there's a woman who kind of encourages women in mosques to cycle, because she knows that like there's not much, that they don't feel like they want to cycle. So but there was all of this real culture coming into it, and it's just not what I expected. I expected lots of middle-aged men in lycra, to be frank, and just got this kind of beautiful kind of moment of people coming together. So that was absolutely my highlight of the week. Loads of other examples, like we had the Football Association just went for it, the FA, and then Birmingham in particular, they asked all of their clubs to do things for Great Big Green Week, and that was things like walking and cycling to the match and all of that. So it was kind of bringing climate change into people's everyday lives, rather than kind of, it's like what I was saying before, like not asking people to just become a different person, but just to kind of incorporate, acting on climate change into who they were. Councils really got on board. We were really pleased with that. And then so just a few stats to finish off, because these are, I loved hearing these. But firstly, so 45% of organisers had not previously organised a climate event. That blew us away, because it's massive. So that could be like the football clubs, or it could be people who do litter picking and they don't normally class it as climate, but they sort of did. But so 45%, that was amazing. 40% of participants also had not previously gone to a climate related event. So it did reach new audiences because it was so open. 88% of organisers felt more connected to others, which is what I was talking about earlier on. We're really keen about that. And then 94% of them want to carry on working together, and that's just made us very happy. So that's one of the main things we want. Obviously, we wanted to raise the profile of climate change ahead of COP, but we really wanted to kind of use this moment to help strengthen communities, so that they were kind of like, those that weren't thinking about climate change already started thinking about them, and also these relationships were forming. So anyway, really happy to chat later in the Q&A, but I think we're going to show a video now.
Yeah, that's just amazing. I just wanted to reflect on that before I share the video, because it reminded me of people's stories from the stage yesterday, where they started sort of small and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And that joy when you go, oh, it's growing and it's growing and it's growing. And I remember we were talking about, actually, is a litter pick climate action, and how people don't see those, I don't know, the smaller actions have that huge impact. So thank you for that, and your passion and your joy just radiates from you. Hopefully this film will also radiate. So here's a little clip from Great Big Green Week. When I press play.
It's the Great Big Green Week, which sees communities up and down the country celebrate nature and take action on climate change.
Beautiful. Thank you. That was amazing. I hope that played okay for everybody. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Fiona.
Thank you for letting me speak about it. As you can tell, I've loved it.
Yeah, no, and it was so impressive to see all those, yeah, the I don't know, the momentum that built from doing something like that. Well done. Yeah. Hats off to you. I'm sure everybody is impressed. Well, now for our next guest, Emma. Are you there? So we know. Hello.
Hello. Gosh, that was fortuitous. My internet dropped out and brought me back in just in time.
Just in time. I was like, where's Emma? Emma's like, I don't want to follow Fiona, and ran away.
I apologise in advance, everyone, if my internet doesn't hold. So Tracey, if you don't mind, just waving at me if it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, as I said, following that, we have yet another amazing example of the joys and challenges of working together. And I'm going to hand over to Emma to introduce herself and to chat about that a bit more and the work you've been doing.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Tracey, and hello everyone. It's lovely to be here. Yes, so my name's Emma Burt and I am the Community Development Manager for the RSPB. It's quite a new role. It's all very exciting. The RSPB's shifting a lot into a kind of new way of working, much more people-centric. But what I wanted to talk about today was exactly as the title of this session alludes to, the beauty of working together. And it was wonderful to see the Climate Coalition and all the amazing work of people coming together in one massive movement for nature. I wanted to talk about Back from the Brink, which was my previous role before the one that I'm currently in. Back from the Brink was the largest partnership of conservation organisations that there's ever been. There were 8 key environmental organisations and then over 40 others that were involved. It was funded by the National Ostrich Heritage Fund, as they're now known, and it was a 3-year project that covered England, looking at trying to save very, very rare species on the brink of extinction, hence the title, the name. But just to kind of start us off, I thought I'd hopefully inspire you a little. We've got a 1-minute short film that was made for the project, just to give you a little idea of what it was all about, and then I will talk about the beauty of people working together in order to make it happen. So Tracey, I believe you're sharing the video. Thank you.
This toad is making its way from the dunes over towards the sea, and it's doing this for dinner.
They normally find their nest close to a birch tree like this one because the ants milk these aphids for their honeydew.
Tracey. There we go, folks. So that's some of the amazing nature that we were trying to save, all here in England. And but what I wanted to kind of reflect on was the partnerships. It's finished now. Back from the Brink finished earlier this year, and I wanted to talk about two aspects of people coming together for that project. Yes, the toad was one of my favourites as well. Essentially the partnership itself, so organisations coming together to work with one goal, but I also wanted to talk about the community arts, which was a programme within the project that I managed alongside a whole load of wonderful artists, and the joys of that. So obviously, like I said, it was the first time this had been done in the conservation sector, and it was obviously quite challenging initially for 8 large organisations coming together, like I say, with 40 others across England, all of varying sizes. We had the RSPB, which is a huge organisation, international organisation, all the way through to Bumblebee Conservation, which are a much smaller team. But the beauty was in recognising the strengths, the individual strengths, not only of the individuals themselves, but the individual strengths of each organisation. And we were massive advocates for really highlighting and celebrating those strengths, expertise, and sharing that. And that is something that and I don't want to speak on behalf of the environmental sector, but I think a lot of people would say who are a part of it, that is something that we struggle with a little bit sometimes for a raft of reasons. As we all know, there's always competition for funding and visibility, and we're all essentially just trying to do a wonderful thing for nature and people. But the partnership was just lovely in bringing people together. There were challenges, logistical, structural, GDPR, the joy that is, but it was just, like I say, really lovely to have the ability to work in a far more agile way, and to really utilise everything that the partnership had at its fingertips. So from a partnership point of view, it was just the most incredible experience. We were also looking at, obviously, trying to have a real impact on people as well. So obviously, as you can see from that film, it's very nature heavy. I will say right now that I don't come from a background of nature. I'm an artist, so very, very odd to have me placed in this programme. But it was wonderful because the National Lottery Heritage Fund really wanted us to have an impact on people, place and planet. And so my job was the people side of stuff. And essentially, they wanted to take people through a journey of discovery, value and action. And that really simple 3-step journey was what we used as a partnership. And so it wasn't just about, bat walks and beetle finds and all of this jazz. We wanted to diversify the opportunities that we gave for people to connect with nature. So what we did is we found out about the communities local to these rare species, and a lot of the communities had no idea that this wildlife was right on their doorstep. One of my favourites was in Thetford, which if you're not as au fait with Thetford, it is an incredibly deprived area. It has some of the most deprived communities in England, and we went into a school that had absolutely no knowledge that within this estate of houses, this tiny little green patch, which was probably about 20 metres squared, had the last remaining beetle. It was the last remaining site of this incredible beetle, and no one knew about it. And so we went into the school and we ran a fantastic arts piece where the school children were able to create sculptures inspired by the rare species in the Brecklands, which is the Suffolk-Norfolk border. So that brings me on kind of from the partnership, like I say, and all the challenges, but all of the wonder that came out of that, to the staff themselves. So from a more kind of internal point of view, the Back from the Brink staff were in the majority conservationists. So we had people from Natural England, we had people all the way through to Bug Life, and a lot of them did not have the confidence or capability or expertise to run more diverse opportunities opportunities. You know, the very traditional conservation, let's go on a butterfly walk, was their comfort zone. And so another wonderful thing that the Back from the Brink partnership showed was that when I started to bring artists into the project, the conservation specialists were learning from those artists and would be a part of the art events that we ran, which I'll talk about more in a second. And they built their confidence through seeing how else nature connection events could be run. And some of the biggest skeptics that right at the start of Back from the Brink were sitting there going, oh no, this will never work, this sounds awful, why on earth would you bring art into nature? And I know that they'll like me bringing that back up, but by the end of the program they were some of our biggest advocates. Oh, Emma, why have we not done this for years? This is fantastic. So we now have, from out of the Back from the Brink program, we have a festival happening in the Dearne Valley, which is one of the last spaces for the willow tit, a really rare tiny little bird, and it's in Yorkshire. And they are now running a festival in line with local poets and writers, and it's just beautiful. And that came out of it. So there's some real legacy there that shows the connection that partnership brought, not only between the organisations and the sector, but also between the sector and the communities on the ground. And so lastly, I just wanted to talk about the community arts programme, like I said, which was all around that value aspect of the Discover, Value, Act journey. And for those of you who are aware of nature connection as a concept, it was something that was absolutely fundamental to Back from the Brink. So nature connection is that idea of connection rather than contact to nature, and the hope that through connection we can create a more sustainable relationship with the natural environment, and therefore people are more likely to act. So we brought artists in from across England, and they had a range of different expertise. We had a sculptor, we had someone who was a poet, we had somebody who was ran kind of nature art workshops, so real range. And they helped us to diversify our events so that we had bat walks, we had stuff for people that were more traditionally focused on conservation, but we also had lino printing or cyanotype in the dunes and the Sefton coast, and lantern workshops for the moths over in the Brecklands, and it was just wonderful. If I could ask, I think it might be Tracey, but it could also be Sophie, to just share their screen with a gallery from Back from the Brink. We created a range of beautiful artworks, folks, which hopefully you'll be able to see some of. So if you just scroll slowly through, that's very kind of you, thank you. So you can see here banners. We've mixed in some beautiful photos of the species themselves, lanterns. You've even got poetry here, so if you don't mind just pausing just there. Dear Godwit of the Black Tail, you're beautiful, and I'm only sorry we haven't made enough space for you here. I hope that we can get better. That was written by a 9-year-old near Welmy, and just beautiful. So please feel free to keep scrolling, Sophie or Tracey. Thank you so much. So all of this, it will load, folks. It should load. More imagery. All of this was happening, there we are, across England, like I say, and I collated together all of the artwork that communities were doing, and we've produced this gallery. So this is, I think, is just absolutely beautiful. This is people who, most of whom had never connected to nature, who didn't even have an idea that this nature was there on their doorsteps, showing their passion for the environment. We did such a range of stuff. That photo of the family there, that's at the Eden Project. So hello, Eden Project communities. And that was absolutely fantastic. We had resource produced, that Fans of the Forest is a zine. So we had resource that we've put online so that anybody, even if they weren't able to make these events, could still do stuff at home with their children, etc. So it was just wonderful, and the people we met were so inspirational, and people that came along to our events said, you know, that they wanted to then volunteer, they wanted to do what they could for the community, for the local nature. So it was just wonderful, and it helped the sector, I hope, thank you, diversify, like I say, its opportunities, but also consider how they were engaging with people and how to ensure that they were doing it in a way that not only was more equal and inclusive, but more approachable as well. So yes, there are so many lessons learnt. I could go on for days, but if anyone has any further questions, just drop me a line in the chat. There is so much there. The website is still live, back from the brink. So if you just type in nature, bftb.com, I'll pop some stuff in the chat, and any questions, please do let me know as well. Yeah, but thank you so much to the Eden Project communities for having me, and I can't wait to hear all about groundwork.
Thank you, Emma. That is absolutely beautiful. It really reminded me again of something I heard yesterday, where someone had said the scientists had done their bit, and now it was for the artists, the storytellers, and the communicators to get that message across. And I just think you just were such a great advocate for that, and it was just beautiful. I also had the joy of being in a poetry and paint session yesterday, which was all about hedgerows. So I think that seeing our nature as part of our community, not a part of it, and part of our culture, and part of the beautiful place within which we live is beautiful. So well done, and thank you for sharing. That was gorgeous. And so do I look forward to hearing from Groundwork. So thank you, Emma. We're going to move on to Graham and special guest star Caroline. I'm going to let Graham introduce Caroline, but first of all, over to you, Graham, my love.
Hello, thank you. I'm Graham. I'm the Chief Executive of Groundwork. I'd love to carry on the conversation about climate change and art. I must admit, that's a real passion of mine. Just on the basis that I heard someone say the other day, an artist, that we make what we can imagine. And there's never been a more important time to imagine a future that's different to the one that we seem to be heading towards. So bringing art and culture right into the middle of that conversation about climate, I think will be really, really important over the next few years. But I hadn't prepared to talk about that, but maybe we can come back to that in the chat. So I just want to say a few words before handing over to Caroline. A very few words. I must admit, this was an irresistible title for a session. So well done, Tracey, or whoever dreamt it up, and it's a title that really strikes a chord with me. Actually, it's really resonant, not least because the organisation that I've given the best part of my working life to was sparked by just such a coming together of different people and a cross-fertilisation of ideas, which is what you get when different people come together. So it was people from the fledgling ecology movement in the 1970s mixing with people who were thinking about the social impacts of deindustrialisation, and then taking learning from the international development sector about community-based solutions to poverty. And out of that melting pot came an experiment that was aimed at repairing damaged land, bringing nature into urban areas, but doing that through mechanisms that built social capital and economic prospects. And it was out of that came the network of Groundwork Trusts that's operating across the UK today. And for those with an interest, a sister network doing very similar things operating across the US. So I guess back then, it was all about land that was blackened by industrial dereliction. It was about a loss of community due to the collapse of work-based social welfare, such as miners' welfare, that kind of stuff was starting to fray. And then it was about mass unemployment caused by the transition away from heavy industry and manufacturing. Now, it's about the loss of biodiversity and the inequality of access to healthy environments. It's about isolation and exclusion in the digital age for some people, and it's about the need to reskill for a low carbon net zero economy. But it's still that same mix of environmental, social and economic pressures that impact on local communities and impact on people's everyday lives. And I suppose what we've learned over the 40 years that we've been in existence is how much power you can generate by supporting collective community action. It really is a powerful force and possibly the missing link in all of the conversations that are going on at the moment about kind of global agreements. You need all of that, you need national policy, but then everybody seems to flick to individual actions, and you kind of jump across that space in the middle, which is about how powerful we can be when we all club together and do something, and the beautiful stuff that can happen. However, as with all forms of power, it's unequally shared in our society, and those who live in places and in circumstances where you could argue most change is needed generally have less power to make that change happen for themselves. And when I was starting out on my career with Groundwork, full of excitement about all the wonderful ways in which I was going to help change places and change lives, a wise old head that worked for us at the time told me that my number one job was to help people overcome bureaucracy, which I must admit didn't sound quite as kind of glamorous and exciting at the time, but it was absolutely bang on. So it's about how do we help people understand and overcome the obstacles that stop them doing what they want to do and what they know needs to be done to improve their local area. So beautiful things do happen when people come together, but those beautiful things, I would argue, can be even more purposeful and even more powerful when there's a proper support structure and professional expertise on tap, so that the impact of that action is greater and so that it can be sustained in the longer term. So as I said, I'm not going to say any more. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Caroline, who works for Groundwork in the northwest of England, to talk about a place for me that embodies some of those principles in action. I'll hand the talking stick to you, Caroline, if that's all right.
Thank you, Graham. That was fab. Yeah, lovely. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. This is not my normal Saturday morning, but this is great. I can't believe I have to follow Emma and Fiona's speeches though, because I'm on so much of a smaller scale than you guys. You're doing things on such a grand scale, but I work on a very local scale at one individual community garden called Grow Zone in Northwich. So yeah, I'll chat a little bit about that. First of all, just to sort of set the scene, I suppose, I would love for everyone listening to take a big breath in, maybe even close your eyes for a second, and just imagine a place that isn't your home that you find restful and relaxing. Just picture it for a second or two. Now, I wonder if you can pop it in the chat or just maybe wave a hand at me or something. I wonder how many people are outdoors in that space. Yeah. And how many people how many people are in spaces particularly with nature? Yeah, outside, local parks, yeah, absolutely. So first of all, that shows us that it's sort of wired into us that we feel relaxed in natural spaces, which I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, you all know this, but obviously we've spent almost all of our human evolution not in urban areas, not in the cities, and that hardwiring is sort of the first bit of magic that helps us at community gardens to fight against any of the mental health barriers that spring up and all the other troubles that we seem to be struggling with in today's society, that we're lacking this connection with nature. So that we have that inbuilt in us is our first great strength. Okay, now do the same. Take a breath and close your eyes, and picture a time, it doesn't matter when, that you laughed until you cried. One of those laughs that starts like right in the bottom of your stomach and wobbles all the way up to your chest, that you're folding over, you're crossing your legs, you're doubled up laughing, you can barely control yourself. Those laughters that come in waves and then it peters off and then it comes back again and you can't control it. Have a moment, picture that. Now tell me, with a little show of hands or in the chat, were you alone when you were laughing like that? No. So usually, I'd imagine, I bet my waterproof trousers that most of you had someone else there that was either laughing with you or that was making you laugh. Yeah, lovely, Fiona, we did a joke for your son. Yeah, absolutely. So again, people need people, particularly for happiness. So all those examples, with your dad, how lovely. That within us, there's this inbuilt need for people, especially to produce joy. So what a combination. Why not put these two amazing things together that are already within us? it seems an easy solution to put the people and the outdoors together in a place in order to combine, to make something beautiful and to make something effective and wonderful, which in our case is in the form of a garden. And I have had the pleasure in working in these circumstances at Grayzone Community Garden for 6 years, which is amazing. And it is such an example of how much beauty can come together when people are working as a team. Like I say, it's just small scale, but this is something that could be replicated almost anywhere. In my opinion, there should be a community garden available to everyone in every town, suburb, city, everything around. If I just share my screen, then then I can just show you some pictures as I talk, so you don't have to just look at my face, of the garden, and I can give some examples. So this is, I hope everyone can see that okay. So this is Grayzone in the summer. Grayzone is about 1.5 acres. It's in the town centre of Northwich Town, and it was a site of antisocial behaviour, lots of broken down greenhouses. It used to be a nursery, so lots of rubble. It was a real hangout for guys. So in 2008, groundwork took over this site where it looked a bit like this. We were lucky enough to have lots of trees already in there, but otherwise it was a real mess. So lots of tidying up to do. So back in 2008, volunteers started working along with groundwork to clear up the space and turn it into something beautiful. So this is our first physical example of what happens when people work together. So this is some pictures of the site from very recently. We aim to be really accessible so that everyone can get together. So these are some of our raised beds. You can pull wheelchairs up and under them. Everything that's on the site was built by volunteers and a member of staff who's very skilled at woodworking. In the bottom right hand corner is our amazing outdoor kitchen with a pizza oven and a kettle that boils 10 litres of water at once, which is just about enough for a round of teas for volunteers on a thirsty day. We're also lucky enough to have an incredible allotment plot where we grow a lot of food. All the food that we grow we share with the volunteers that are working with us, or they go to a local food hub so that they can be shared out with those that need us some fresh food. We have amazing spaces, so we've got an incredible wildlife pond, which in fact several incredible wildlife ponds, but this is a real favourite with adults and children alike for pond dipping. We also have a forest garden for food growing. It's a relatively new forest garden, so it's not yet producing fruit, but we're starting to add the shrub layer and it's all coming together in the forest garden. We're also very much there for wildlife, so there's habitat piles, there's bird boxes everywhere. We know that we've got foxes and badgers that visit. Mostly the badgers eat our sweet corn, which is not ideal, but there we go, we don't mind sharing. And it's just a wonderful space, especially for bird life. Actually, we often see woodpeckers and a myriad of small garden birds in Grayzone. So that's the first, I guess that's the physical part of things, beautiful things that happen when people come together. Relationships and experiences are our other product. So I'm going to introduce you to two people that come to the garden. I can see that Simon's on the chat. Simon, don't worry, it's not you. I'm not going to, don't feel worried. Simon's one of my volunteers that comes. But it might be some familiar faces for you, Simon. So some relationships and experiences. This is Mark. He started coming to Grayzone with his special needs school, Petty Pool, I think about 5 years ago. Came in a group with a teacher and worked in a group of friends. Since then, through the support of other volunteers and the staff, Mark's finished school and started coming to Grayzone on his own, dropped off by someone who was supporting him, working together. He now lives in supported living and walks to Grayzone on his own twice a week to come and work with us. He's up for anything. He's always chirpy. So on the left, we cook together and share a meal every other week with the produce that we've grown in the garden. We did a Roots to Wellbeing course where some of the volunteers got certificates for their work. We do music sessions and art sessions. Mark will get stuck in with everything, but this is thanks to being part of a community that he has got to build up a friendship group, move out of his parents' house into his own place with some support, and can come independently to work with us. We made some puppets out of elderwood. We've been making some soup. So there's all sorts of different stuff going on. Mark gets stuck in with it all, but which is really wonderful. But this is development that he has been able to achieve through the work of being all together with other people. The second person I want to introduce to you is Roy. He is, so two different people have come in for very, very different reasons to Grey Zone, but I hope with the same amount of success. So this is Roy. He came to us when his wife died. Her name was Carol, and she was his soulmate, and he was at a complete loss of what to do with himself, and his daughter encouraged him to come to us just for something to do. He works incredibly with the other volunteers. He used to work for the gas board, so he's very technically minded and knows how to make and do things. So here he's putting up a hammock for my toddler sessions. In Roy's own words, he said after he started to come to us that he managed to sleep again at night, and he found that the garden was a lifeline and that Grey Zone's helped him get his independence back. He does all sorts of things, and he's also even been in Take a Break magazine, so has been a national star for us. That's him mending a roof with his friend Pete, and picking some fruit, and him and myself by our beautiful pond. So it just shows the sort of healing that can take place in very different ways. Just for a couple of examples there, of people that can come and join us. I hope that's stopped the sharing now. Yeah, that people can come and join in with us and just see incredible things and be part of something wonderful. But that only happens when we're together. So the magic only works in combination, when it's not only been outdoors but been in a community setting with an amazing group of people that can come and join us. That's more or less all I've got to say about that, really. Very, very happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
I think that that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Caroline. And honestly, I think it was Emma that says so wholesome she wants to live there. Me too. And I think someone also said actually your framing at the beginning, and I think we'll tell you off for saying just a local project, because there's no such thing as just. But that framing of thinking about a place that brings you joy, and then thinking about people who bring you joy, and bringing that together was so simply put and yet so impactful. It was incredible. So I'd like to thank you to that. And that does, honestly, listening to everything has really filled me with, hope for the future. So we've got some time now. If we bring all our panelists back, and including Graham, even though he's trying to have a light session this morning, I know what he's up to, just to maybe have a bit of a conversation. And I just wanted to go right back before we go to the questions to something you said, Graham, and I think something that we touched on. There's two things really. One about, I talk about powerfully ordinary actions and powerfully ordinary people. And you were talking about the collective power we have if it's supported well, how much further it goes. And I was thinking about that when Fiona was talking about Great Big Green Week, that actually having that extra support of someone to change the lights on the eye and, making it more visual, that collective community power goes a lot further, and actually people do go from right up there to the extremes of individual, where the Festival of Discovery is all about that collective community action. I wonder whether you wanted to say a little bit more about that, Graham, or if anybody else wants to join in on that.
I won't say too much more, but it kind of goes back to the point I made towards the end, that there's a job to be done by somebody to make sure that the kind of passions, the inspiration, the aspiration of people who want to improve their area can get as far as it can, and sometimes that's really dull stuff in the background. What Caroline does is amazing, but I bet you'll say that quite a lot of your job is kind of doing the dull things that allow people to get on and do the stuff that they want to do, allow your volunteers the time and space and support and resources, constantly finding resources. Quite often it will be just acting as a translation agency. Communities and local councils speak different languages. you can't get very far with kind of community powered action without butting up against a local authority with its plans and strategies and issues that it's got to deal with for all the reasons that it has to do that. But someone needs to broker that conversation quite often. Someone needs to kind of unblock that stuff and get over barriers. So that's what I mean by that. There's an infrastructure job there that needs doing that we don't often talk about. People don't like talking about it. It is a bit dull. It's not the exciting stuff that you see at the kind of front end, the sharp end of all of this. But unless, I can, pick up on lots of other groundwork projects that have happened over the years in, similarly inspirational projects. Quite a lot of them wouldn't have happened or wouldn't have lasted for as long as they've lasted without that stuff happening underneath. To make sure that the thing ticks, to make sure the world goes round. So, I mean, Growzone's been there for years, isn't it, Caroline? It's a long-lasting community project. But every year, there'll be some anxiety about, can we keep the lights on? Can we keep, can we still afford the tea bags? All that kind of stuff needs sorting in the background.
I think it's really, it does hit the nail on the head, and we are in a similar but slightly different place. So I think that goes back to what your first job was to do, was to get rid of bureaucracy. And it is about how do you put that backbone support structure in to keep people going. At Eden Project Communities, we absolutely work in that informal layer. So telling people we're not doing risk assessments, we're not having food, health and hygiene certificates, it's just neighbours coming to do something together in their neighbourhood, terrifies, officialdom. They don't like it. So there's a big journey to come on to meet in the middle, but actually that's how that sustains. So the community action I've done in the past, especially with the neighbourhood approaches to loneliness work, is still going on decades later. And that's because local people came together to find out what that local area needed and got on with it, and I think it is a real challenge, of working with formal infrastructure, about actually sometimes it can create more barriers than that supportive sort of environment to help things flourish. I wonder if anybody else has any reflections on that. Emma.
Yeah, I'm actually really glad to hear us talking about this, and just to really support what Graham was saying, to be honest. More of a thought really than anything else, that I think at the moment a lot of pressure and responsibility is put on the individual action. And I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that I think that individual action is not needed, that is not, absolutely admirable, and that it doesn't have impact. It absolutely does. But just to kind of, like I say, support what Graham says, I think that it's been really wonderful. And your video, Fiona, kind of showed that, this people power that's pushing back and actually saying to those that can, facilitate change in policy, legislation, stuff where we actually need the change to happen. So rather than us being told to stop buying plastic, it's like, well, actually, why isn't there more responsibility being placed on those that are producing it? And I think that I just wanted to kind of make the point that it's wonderful to see that a recognition of the power of individuals coming together rather than just the individuals themselves. So I completely think that what you're doing, Caroline, is wonderful. And I completely wanted to just say, like, as Tracey said, there is no such thing as just. It's people like yourself. It's those spaces that are absolutely fundamental to this movement. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Yeah. And I think that just goes absolutely to what you were saying. It's the big stuff and the individual stuff that gets the recognition, but actually it's that stuff in the middle, that people think, oh, it's neither here nor there, but it's so crucial, so important. And, everybody's got to start on a journey somewhere. Someone's asked in the chat, what advice would you give to anyone nervous about taking that first step into their community or community action? Anybody want to address that?
Yeah, so I popped a little thing in the chat there. So I think the first thing is to find a tribe. So a bit like what we're saying about people needing people, and social media is so amazing for that. But there's loads of groups out there now, the transition movement, there's all sorts of stuff going on where there's people probably thinking the same stuff already. So finding people that are like-minded that can add something to whatever you're dreaming about I reckon is the absolute first place to start. Find someone to buoy you up and keep each other going, and then finding, for something like Growzone, finding a space that would be suitable within your community. There are when you start to look, there are so many grubby little spots around on the corners of shopping centre. There's all sorts of space that has great potential, even tiny spaces, to be something really wonderful. So then it's finding that space and finding out who owns it and going from there. But because those spaces are so unloved, usually it's really well received when people are keen to make something of them and make a space beautiful. So, but yeah, find your people first. I think that's the main thing, and then you don't need courage. If you're feeling nervous, you don't need the courage, because it comes from being part of a group that know what they're doing.
That is so true. We often talk about finding your anchors. So who's the people that are going to keep you going? I love finding your tribe. Fiona, you've unmuted. Were you going to say something there?
Actually, you've sort of given the answer that I was going to give, but I suppose what I'd just say is that maybe your tribe isn't obvious, so it might not be it might be like if you're really into crafting more than gardening, it might be the Women's Institute, or it might be a sports club, or like a residents association. That is like all of those groups are starting to get more into this sort of community greening now. So you can look really widely and look at who you're already talking to, because actually you're probably more involved in the community than you think you are.
Lovely. And then I'm really mindful of time, keep looking at that clock, but I just wanted to go back to the art and climate and nature conversation that we were just touched on earlier. And I think, again, I'll pick on Emma and Graham, because you said you'd like to chat about this a bit more. So just a sort of final words of why we're so passionate and why this is not necessarily a new area, but an area that is definitely getting a little bit more kudos. I wonder, Graham?
As my reflection is probably, the back end of the 2 weeks of COP. It's all about the science, and it's all about the politics, and it has to be all about the science and the politics. But one of the issues we've somehow collectively got to get over is the prevailing narrative about difficulty and challenge and sacrifice and so on, and start to find that narrative about positivity and opportunity and hope and a better life and so on and so forth. And the science doesn't take you there, and the politics seldom takes you there. But art absolutely can take you there. It can imagine a future that doesn't exist now. And that's the power of it. It's all about the imagination, and it's also one of the best ways of engaging children and young people in this conversation, because you have natural creativity until it gets beaten out of you as you grow up and experience the world. So harnessing that creativity at a young age, and then using that as a way of thinking the unthinkable and visioning the previously unimaginable. Art is the medium through which we need to do that. So and there's a lot of art I've seen over the last few years which is about exemplifying the challenge and the issue. So there's a lot of that around. It'd be really great to start thinking about how great art can start to kind of envisage that great future that we need to work towards, because as I said earlier, if you can imagine it, you can make it. And that's what it's all about for me.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I don't know whether you can add to that, Emma.
Gosh, I'm not sure I can. I love that, Graham. But I suppose the only thing I wanted to add is that, and it touches on the question, apologies, from Sandy. I also have a disability, Sandy, and it is hard. But I think that's the other beautiful thing about art, is that it's so much more accessible. We have mass inequality in access to nature, unfortunately, in this country. And whereas art, being able to just draw on a pavement or, scribble on a piece of paper is so much more easily accessible. And I think that there is something in that, you know, that the natural sector, I feel, needs to recognise, and I think it is recognising that to even have the time, the money, the resource to worry about the nature and climate crisis is coming from a very privileged position. There are people in this country that cannot necessarily even pay their next bill. To expect them to care about nature is quite ignorant, I feel, and unfair. Whereas in order to, you know, just by bringing art to them and bringing these topics to them in a way that they actually can act, even in a small way, and can create that relationship, I think Graham's right. There's beauty in that, and art is everything. Everything is art. We're such visual people. Everything is. The clothes we wear, you know, how we interact with space, how, you know, the psychology behind colour. There's so much there. So it's true inclusion, and I think that's what's so beautiful about it.
Oh, you know, I think we might just end on that note, because I do think those two last messages are incredible about coming together, the creativity, the imagination, the hopefulness for a better future that is inclusive and makes a change for everyone. Is amazing. That's certainly set up my Saturday. I thank you all for sharing your Saturday morning with us, and for sharing your wisdom and experience and your passion, which has come through so wholeheartedly. It's a joy to know you. You're now my friends. We're going to pop a survey in the chat if anybody wants to give us some feedback about how you felt about this session. And of course, this will go up online, even with small child. So you'll be able to watch again for hopefully the next year. But thank you everybody so much for your time and energy. And I wish you to continue this. May you long continue for our communities and our climate and for our culture and our art. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracey.
Thank you so much, Tracey.
Okay, thank you everybody.